Okay, welcome back. Hour number 2. I talked to Dr. Bill Deagle this hour, as we do each week. And Bill is a master of the art of conversation and insight, and is loaded with knowledge and data about all kinds of different things. Here's a quickie for you. As you know, the entire field of organic foods, whether they be animal or vegetable, has been certainly under assault for quite some time on a number of different fronts. There's an article I'll put up tonight, Why You Can No Longer Trust the USDA Organic Label. This is not a surprise to me. The contaminants, of course, are all over the place, GMO contaminants among many things. USDA Organic is simply a marketing term for those who take government ethics at face value. The goal has always been to increase agricultural sales, not to promote organic farming. The public seems to confide in this label through sheer ignorance. The National Organic Program, which governs the USDA Organic Label, has no interest in organic farming, improving soil quality of the produce, or factors that pollute the environment. In another blow to their organics program that will further downgrade consumer confidence, the USDA announced this week that the agency has changed the process for exempting otherwise prohibited substances, such as synthetics, in food that carries the organic or made with organic ingredients label. This decision makes it easier to continue the use of artificial ingredients and substances, undermining the integrity of the organic label further. So, where do you go, Bill, anywhere to get the good stuff beside your local farmers markets? I guess that's about it.
Yeah, that's true. Although you almost have to source exactly what's going on from the individual pharmacy, right?
Precisely, yeah.
Your individual. You have to track back and say who is your supplier.
Yeah, you got to go to the grower and because they buy basic supplies from sometimes big corporations. They won't.
Well, you want to know it's a local grower. You want to know they're truly organic. The organic has lots of different twists to it. They can be using ground that has been previously used for non-organic, so it's got pesticides.
For years and years and years. Now, those should technically be called transitional organics, but they don't always label them that way.
Right. And the other thing is that truly organic is using natural means to control pests rather than toxic. And, it's like that old Joni Mitchell song, get rid of the DDT so, you put a few spots in your apples so the birds and the bees will live.
True.
It's pretty bizarre. Lots of stuff in the news. It's interesting that this week I'm sandwiched between Henry Nyman and
Patty Doyle.
Patty Doyle, because they're both infectious experts. And I've been digging up information. Of course, I have other sources that contact me besides the stuff that's public. And I think we're on the verge of an airborne plague. And there's been a number of different candidates. We've got the SARS coronavirus, which is basically, if you get a mild version of it, it's like a mild case of the cold or flu. But if it goes in your deep lungs, it kills you. You have about a 90% chance of dying. And if you survive, you're probably going to have renal failure and maybe on a ventilator.
There are other issues, too, neurological issues, mental issues.
They end up, what happens is this happened after the flu in 1918, where we saw a lot of people develop what's called frozen man syndrome, where they get damage to the extrapyramidal nervous system in their brain, or they end up with dementia. They get basically a form, it looks like Parkinson's, but it's not, because it affects similar pathways. And they get delayed damage to those nerves where they eventually die. And it can take decades. In fact, I saw a case that was actually written up in the 1970s that was actually a survivor of the 1918 flu, and eventually developed frozen man syndrome. Basically, this is like 50 years after. Pretty amazing, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people don't realize you can get almost like a poliomyelitis type of lack of muscular control that can happen as well. So you can get the respiratory failure, all kinds of things happen. The research I have, and I've been pulling up some, because we talked about this before, because one of my sources said that the virus, the H7N9 virus, this is a source goes inside the University in Colorado, and a source inside the Department of Homeland Security, that's one of their virologists, says this virus is definitely a lab virus. We also have a source in China.
H7N9, definitely a lab virus.
Yeah. Right. The H7N9 virus also is genetic. And I just want to pull up a couple of their articles there because I think it's worthwhile. CDC has analyzed the virus characteristics and transmissibility, and there's some interesting little bits of data about this virus, because there's certain mutations that showed up in the in various, if you want to call, pandemics in the past. There's a mutation called substitution Q226L, and it's basically found in the pandemics of 1957 and 1968. Interesting. You also see some other mutations that show up in pandemic flu. So H7N9 is a real big candidate virus. It also it can also infect ferrets, which means they're an example of human infection, and it very likely could transition to infect pigs or other animals. So there's a wider range of animals that are closer to human biology that allows us to create vectors. So it might take even several years for it to change enough for it to develop a population of vectoring organisms that are loaded up to the virus, and then a few minor changes. The other thing, of course, is that these viruses, like the SARS coronavirus, are able to grow at much lower temperatures than normal SARS in these animals. And so they're able to grow instead of in the birds and humans. And H7N9 is a good example of viruses that grow at lower temperatures, so it allows it to spread much more readily. So we have a number of those candidates. The third one that's going on is H3N2V, which showed up this fall 2.5 months early.
Mm-hmm.
And that virus has acquired some of the lethal gene combinations of the H1N1 flu of 2009. A lot of people think it was a nothing, but there are a lot of people that didn't have any pre-existing conditions like diabetes or heart disease or previous cancer treatment. They got very sick, and many of them got seriously in problems.
Well, that showed up at county fairs this year. That's
right. And the newer one, the H3N2V, is kind of whipping through the population. It requires a few more mutations. It could be quite nasty too, or not mutations, recombinations. Because what happens is there's a lot of viral mutations or combinations out there, and the reason why I mentioned mutations too is because when you put a virus under extreme stress, a host that's very sick, or you expose them to radiation. In fact, they discovered this years ago in their animal studies. They take an animal and put a virus in it, and they expose it to a cyclotron radiation source. They can actually mutate the virus at extremely high rates to become extremely lethal. So if you want to weaponize a virus, you put it in a host like a ferret, and each time you inject that virus into the next ferret, you do multiple generations, and you re-expose them to radiation. And you now got a very rapidly spreading, extremely lethal virus. That's a standard technology. It's been known since the 60s. Interesting, eh?
It is. As you say, there is a lot going on. Everywhere you look, there's a lot going on. Nothing's stable anymore, it doesn't seem. Things are constantly...
Well, I think there's some reasons for it. A lot of people think it's just international travel causing it. There's environmental factors.
No.
There's environmental factors. For example, when you stress organisms like they found about the zone of alienation around Chernobyl, they thought most of the animals would die, but in fact the radiation levels were high enough that you can get radiation sickness. But the survivor animals developed incredible genetic inductive changes, and many of them did mutate, or if you want to call it we call directional evolution, so that they could survive in the radiation, and it became quite different. And so life survives even in really noxious environments, and it can speed the rate of change of organisms dramatically. So, especially when you're talking about lethal viruses. So, places like Fukushima Prefecture, a virus that infects someone in Japan that already is exposed to radiation increases the chance that host could actually mutate the virus much more quickly, because you have a weakened host with a high load of free radicals. It forces the virus to go through a process of accelerated evolution. Interesting.
It is. I wonder what impact ultimately, and no one's even studying this yet, the low-level, near constant exposure to radioactivity in Japan will have on these viruses and bacteria. Certainly we're going to see changes, and they'll be, in some cases, very unbeneficial to human health.
Well, in humans, there's a process called the pit cow effect. Have you heard of that before?
No.
Dr. Pit cow?
No.
What happens is you get low-level radiation in many ways. If you look at the number of accumulative millisieverts or sieverts, right now, for example, the radiation coming out of Fukushima is around 10 sieverts per hour, which is absolutely off the scale. It's way out in orbit.
Wait. All right, Siebert, 10 sieverts an hour. I read that in some locations they were picking up between 1 and 3 sieverts an hour, but
10 is the one that I've heard lately. And of course, what's happened too is they had released 1,000 tons in the first. You never know what their numbers are.
Well, they lie. They could be 10,000 tons.
They add a zero to it, whatever.
Those tanks could be all empty. We don't even know.
Well, they know the tanks are basically tanks that were not properly constructed.
They're rotting. They had a 5-year life expectancy. That's it.
Right.
That's
and also, they're exposed to neutron annealing. I found out something else today from our nuclear expert. His radio name's Chris Harris, who comes on our show on Thursdays.
Yeah.
And apparently TEPCO's announced that all of the borinated rubber around the fuel rod assembly bundles is basically turned into just gone. So
no,
these things are just ready to have a pyrophoric
They're not
fire.
going to pull those. We have to pause here for a second. They're not going to pull those out of those SFPs. No chance. They're all broken anyway, most of them. Just a second. We'll be right back with Dr. Bill as we continue. Hold on. Okay, and back with Dr. Bill. Taking a look at Fukushima as we always do. 5.9 quake near Fukushima Daiichi today. Obviously stressed the plant even further. It's getting weaker and weaker literally every day around the clock, and it's just a matter of time. TEPCO has no plan. Japanese government has no plan. They don't know how to deal with the fuel rods now, as you just mentioned. That's a big issue, huge, and they don't know where the corium are, 3 of them at least, under the ground. And if they did, they're probably in pieces. Some of them may still be in part in the reactor containment, leaking through. We don't know. They have no means to get them out. None. There's no plan. They have no plan. That's
well, you know what?
I
think that when I see them say there's no plan, I put up repeatedly every week on the program, the medical report, exactly what they need to do to fix it. They need to get rid of water and neutrons. They need to not move any of this corium because they don't know where it is. And they need to stop the idea of that that there's any idea of a cold shutdown. It's fantasy. Just read off a couple of headlines today. Officials concerned 400-foot tall pipe near Fukushima reactors collapsing due to a quake.
Yeah. 8
cracks down support base.
I got that. Yeah.
All these reports. What I tell people practically they need to do now is they're bioaccumulating radioisotopes that are destroying the mitochondria. They need 3 things to carry, part of our radiation.
Bill, get right. We got kind of a weak line. I hear you fine, but get right up on the phone. Let's see if that helps.
Yeah, so what we have is we have 3 nutraceuticals. I tell them immediately they need the diatomic edgar-casey iodine, the nutriodine. They need Nutritrala, which is the alpha-lipoic acid long-acting. We have the only source in the world. And we have also NutriDefense, which I designed specifically to maintain the immune system. Because what happens when your mitochondria start to fail, even acutely for a period of time before they may come back if they're not too blasted, is you get your natural killer cells go away. And this is what happened after Hiroshima. The people literally developed gas gangrene while they still had a pulse. So I don't think people realize that right now they're bioaccumulating. There's going to be major burps of radiation.
They don't know. No.
Yeah, and we can just pretty well predict, just like this time when they released, quote, 1,000+ tons, if there's a hydrogen explosion, because there's now a lot of hydrogen being generated underground, if there's a nuclear criticality or a nuclear explosion, and the nuclear explosions could go off like a set of firecrackers in a box of, these large, explosives, like you do for 4th of July.
Mm-hmm.
So the danger is we could have that. It's right on a fault line as well, which could trigger off a major release of tectonic forces. And that fault line passes through the OI reactor and goes directly through to Mount Fuji, which is the chamber is refilling to ready to blow again, which does about every 150 years. Mount Fuji blows. So the first thing I tell people, personal protection, you've got to drink filtered water. You can't just get a gravitational filter like a Berkey. You need to have a true lab-grade, filtration.
RO?
And, more than RO. Because, for example, our pure water system that I've talked with the engineers to find the best system in the world years ago, it has a linear charcoal. It has the best linear charcoal. It has the best sediment filter, and then it has a 2-ion exchange resin and an RO, and it gets rid of everything. In fact, it's cleaner than distilled water because in the distillate there'll be things that go across the other side. Everybody should have NIOSH and 95 mass for virus, because the chances in the next 6 months to 2 years of a major airborne plague or radiation release is a guarantee. I mean, literally, if you put money on it, unfortunately, this is going to happen. And as the population gets weaker, the chances of a virus mutating and spreading through a population of weakened hosts is dramatically increased. So if you look at this whole situation, you see absolutely no action or even think tanks or even public discussions about let's come up with ideas from the public for what to do. And when I have contacted other people, and when I talk to other engineers who have talked to, quote, the officials, they blow us off. So the government doesn't want a solution. So that raises other big questions. Why do they not want a solution? Well, I see this as a massive genocide and population control policy. Okay?
Coming at us from a number of different directions. Sure.
Right, and it's from every direction. And of course, when you see the push to have a war in Syria, this is multiple issues going on there too. They want to control a pipeline that goes from Iran through northern Iraq and Syria. They want to have a peace treaty there, and even you see the Pope even making strange remarks. I mean, people are freaked out by what this Pope is saying.
Well, give me an example.
Well, his latest comment is that we should stop hand-wringing over the issue of gays and abortion. I mean, I thought this guy was the Pope.
Well, what does that tell us, folks?
Right. So and of course,
he's getting closer to blessing pedophilia. It sounds like.
Well, they basically said, with dogma schmogma, we don't care if you're an atheist. You want to come under the church, no problem. If you're a good person, you do it with a good intent, go get into heaven. You're cool. So, what's the point in religion? That's why I call it real lies going on. What's the point in religion?
No guidelines, no boundaries. You get your card, your membership badge, and you're in.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, he's a good guy. No problem. Well, it doesn't quite work out that way. I tell people you have to have a relationship with the Creator now, and because if you don't, why would you have it when you're dead and the physical body's gone? So it's really straightforward. People have to, and the simplest form of that is just connectedness with each other, just decently. It's not going to church, because I call most of the churches what I call, instead of the Laodicean, which the Bible talks about, I call them the latte church. Or if you
latte churches, good.
Latte churches, right? If you go to a lot of the synagogues, most of the discussion is about geopolitics and money. If you go to most of these so-called multi-denominational churches, they don't want to offend anybody. And even the people that aren't churched, they think they're not church or not religious. People that are atheists, transhumanists, agnostics, it's all just another form of Satanism. It's all Satanism. All of this stuff of me first is all Satanism. So, unfortunately, most of the people, as they say, they think they're rapping on the door of heaven, but their knuckles are on fire. They really don't understand what's going on. And the first symptom of that is we don't care about each other, so we go to war. We don't care about the planet, so we kill it. Or if the planet's being stressed by galactic and cosmic forces, we don't try to help the planet and get it through it.
Right.
Like, stewards. Instead, we amplify the problem by geoengineering the upper atmosphere so it lets through more ultraviolet light. We poison the oceans with toxic chemicals so the benthic layer of the ocean is destroyed. And we then changed monoculture of food, so we had genetically modified food that has promoter genes that can jump into your body and start switching on and off genes, like Lucille Ball and Vivian Vance in the bakery shop. Remember that show many years ago?
No, I missed that one.
Yeah, you missed that one. It's a classic. If you're ever down, you want to really laugh your head off, you got to see that old show. But basically, they're going around throwing switches because they don't know what to do to turn it on or off the production line. And that's what happens inside your genetics. So we are plagued by people that are self-centered. And I don't know if you, on an individual day, whether or not people are stupid or evil. I think most of the problem is that the level of ability to think has been literally drained out of people. People don't have a childlike curiosity.
Oh, it's gone. No, you're right. There's no more proactive life at all.
They're not taught to ask better questions like Leonardo da Vinci, the great philosophers taught them.
They're reactive on a good day. They're not proactive at all.
Right. And I think they're geniuses if they can actually Google something. I call them Google geniuses. If they can Google or Yahoo or whatever, that's a good term for them.
Yeah, it is.
They think that all of a sudden, if it's in print, even if it's in the sewer net, it must be true.
Got to be true. Well, that's that amazing phenomenon of if it's on screen, it's got to be real.
Oh man, it's got to be true.
Yeah. All right. Hold on.
They have channeled the reality of the cybernet.
There it is. Okay, Bill. Hold on a second. We'll come right back. Okay, and welcome back. Talking about many things, as we always do with Dr. Bill. Okay.
I want to mention something about a new vaccine now that they're researching. You've heard about the vaccine to stop cocaine addiction, right?
Yeah.
And of course, what it does is blocks different pathways. What you're creating is actually neural plasticity of the brain is being altered, and of course, they want to give the vaccine monthly. We have this also with effects of toxins, like, for example, electropollution. And electropollution is causing effects that are similar to aspartame in the brain, only it's electromagnetic. It's called a glutamate agonist, so it causes excessive firing of different neurons in the brain. You can burn out neural pathways and create agitation and stress, so it raises free radicals and breaks down the blood-brain barrier, which makes brain proteins allergenic.
Now, hop up on that phone a little bit more for me.
So it makes the brain proteins allergenic. So what happens is you're more likely to end up with brain autoimmune diseases caused by exposure to genetically modified foods and to electropollution. Now, one of the things that I'm detecting when I do these tests that I mentioned before called the quantitative resonant magnetic analysis.
Yeah, hold on to that thought just for a minute. I want to go back to electrosmog, electropollution. What sources are you talking about in specific,
We're
or
talking
just broad brushing it?
No, not broad brushing. I can be specific. The worst of all of them is the smart meters. And the reason is the duty frequency of the switching mode power supplies of smart meters is specifically at frequencies that are very toxic to human tissue. And they researched this over the past 70-plus years.
What are the frequencies?
There's specific frequencies like 2.4 gigahertz, which is the frequency of water, other frequencies of different metalloenzymes.
That's a cell phone frequency, too.
Right. And so what happens, these frequencies are actually the tunable frequency of your microwave generator in your microwave. But there's also other sub-frequencies that are specifically toxic to specific enzymes. They cause induction. For example, there's an enzyme in the brain called ornithine transcarbamylase. There's an enzyme called indicable nitric oxide synthase that generates peroxynitrate radical. Each of these enzymes has a specific harmonic frequency that when you hit them, they will cause induction of the enzyme. And some of these inductions will last for many hours afterward. Repeated exposure opens up pathways and breaks down the blood-brain barrier that becomes permanent or semi-permanent. Now, the reason why I mentioned the quantum resonant magnetic analysis is the Earth has a Schumann resonance. And that resonance actually resonates through all life forms on the planet. So in a sense, we have a global consciousness. And the Earth is an organism. In a sense, we and every other living thing on the Earth are like one of the cells of that organism.
Right, I understand.
And we're connected. And so what happens is when you start disrupting that connection between our cells and between human beings, which are actually connected, because one of the things that people don't understand is that every living thing on Earth is connected with every other living thing. That's why somebody's really empathic. You can actually know. You walk by the plant says, hey, I need water me. Or you go into the forest because you want to get calm, because the forest is calming vibrational influences to your, not only your physical body, but they call your light body, and also, of course, to your spirit. The problem is that
you can also ground out and not be recharged with all this electropollution out there. So,
yeah, exactly. Now, the electropollution, we have a device called a Somopulse, was developed for NASA to stimulate stem cells, and it actually is just a Schumann resonance generator at 10 hertz. And it's the main.
But Schumann is up to 10?
10 is the key frequency, and there's one off to the side. So there's a number of frequencies. It's a whole orchestra of frequencies. They found the key one is the 10, because there's other sub-harmonics that occur around that.
I always thought it was 7.83, and then...
Yeah, that's right, but their research discovered that 10 was close enough that it would affect frequencies above and below it.
All right.
And set up what's called harmonic resonance to kind of trigger those.
That's Royal Rife, all right.
Yeah, so it set up frequencies. Now, when I do the QRMA testing, what I do is I actually pray with people, hold the electrodes as a proxy, just put their height and weight in the machine, into the database, and literally their test results come out, not mine. Now, people might find that's impossible. That can't happen. But the fact is we're all connected. And on a hyperdimensional level, it's what's called non-locality. The idea that I'm an I, I'm also a we. In other words, when we're bombing Syria, when we're starving people, when we're allowing evil to run rampant, we're actually, in a sense, killing a portion of what we are as a collective creature. And when we're allowing the great whales to die, or we're poisoning the oceans, or we're putting high-energy sonar, we're actually killing a portion which allows us to even express our own genetics. And people don't get this. They think it's like, oh, well, that's airy-fairy, that's kind of woo-woo stuff. It's not. In fact, human beings require other living things around them to even express their genetics completely.
Huh.
And they don't understand this. That's why people get attracted to things like gardening or the forest, or zoos and other organisms, and having pets. That's why you see people have a pet, because the pet is sending out frequencies that actually will bring that person to a calmer state. So you'll see people do better.
Soothing, wonderful animals. Now,
yeah, exactly.
Okay, radionics, term you never hear anymore.
Right.
How does radionics tie in and underlie what you're talking about?
Well, it's non-locality. Basically, one of the things is we're trapped in the first of the fifth dimensions that allows us to interpret the signals we receive to understand things in a sense we call it the arrow of time. Now, Einstein kind of blew that apart with his time-space model with time dilation and other things. But what they were doing work on in Europe was the issue of the Higgs boson. And the reason why they call it the God particle is they know that time-space is embedded in something that causes dark matter and dark energy, which makes up most of the mass and most of the energy of the universe. Dark matter and dark energy is the Higgs boson, which is basically where time-space is embedded. But you can go beyond that, and it's called hyperspace. And in hyperspace, it's non-local. Hyperspace basically exists where the non-physical portion of our mind doesn't have locality. There's no such thing as a million miles apart or a billion light years apart, or even the past, present, and future. They don't exist. They're just an illusion for us to understand things at our level in this world. And we were getting more and more evidence to show that. And of course, the hyperspace physics is being researched most by people like Russia, with the research on psychotronic weapons and research on hyperdimensionality and so on. And of course, the Black Ops projects are very advanced in this. They've been using all kinds of technology to kind of scope out potential timelines and then to kind of steer the population toward a specific timeline. So when you see a lot of the money being put into electing a particular individual or putting information on the media, they're trying to insert it into the global collective consciousness so they can steer the population toward a certain eventuality. This is not by happenstance. They treat us like, if you want to call it, like animals to create the milk of the future. Let's put it that way.
Very interesting. Very interesting. All right, we are all living in an essential petri dish, even though it's a rather large one.
We're living in a hologram.
Yeah, and they have dialed us in.
We're dialing out. There's a number of us that listen to this program of mine that are dialed out, and they're becoming hyper-aware of reality.
Well, we hope so. That's what we're trying to do.
It goes beyond what they can see and hear, too.
Okay, back after this. Okay, and welcome back. Dr. Bill.
Jeff, I want to turn it around a little bit and maybe ask you a couple questions. What do you think of the 1, 2, and 3 most likely timelines if there's an attack either now or in the near future on Syria?
I think it's off. Don't think it's going to happen. I think Obama broke. I think this country has been reduced to stooge status now, basically. I think the Israelis are particularly unhappy about all this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right, but I think actually part of it is almost stage managed, just like the announcement today by Bernanke. They're not going to stop the printing of more money. I don't think they ever. You got to remember, you're being scammed even when you're.
Shock.
So yeah, exactly. So I think that the idea that they're going to do a preemptive strike when Russia says "niet" is not only ridiculous. They know the military options. The Joint Chiefs of Staff have told them, that you're walking into a bear trap.
Right.
So then the second thing is, do you think that Fukushima? What do you think the timelines of Fukushima? I see, 3 potential timelines. The first one is that we're going to have major bursts of radiation, and people will really wake up in early 2014 when that major plume of radiation starts to really kill sea life on a major scale on the Canadian and the Western American coast.
Yeah.
And then people really wake up and realize the sea lions are gone, the seals are gone, the birds are gone, the kelp is dangerous, and people will be frightened to go out and even surf or swim in the ocean.
Well, they should be. They've been warned already.
Right. The fact is that the problem is they're going to get pretty angry, and I don't think that the politicians really realize the anger of the public in terms of these situations.
Well, yes, but The public being totally captive of the controlled government, Zionist mainstream media, will pretty much do and react as it's told. Now, there'll be a percentage, 10, 15, internet-wise, internet-savvy people who will be very angry. The blogs will be aflame. But what are they going to do about it? Except stay the hell away from the ocean. That's really the bottom line, if they can even get the government to tell them that much.
Yeah, and of course, but I think what will happen is that there's going to be a lot of outrage. You see, you don't need a large majority. In fact, it's like the American Revolution. Only an active minority changes things. For example,
3%.
When you have an active number of people, for example, we were calling for people to call into their congressman and senator to stop this attack on Syria.
Yeah.
They had no political capital to proceed on this.
Correct.
Recently, for example, they had a recall of 2 state senators in Colorado because of the crazy gun laws.
One senator, one assemblyman.
Yeah. And what happens, that means, is those 2 politicians that went down, they dropped 3 laws that were about to be pushed forward here in California. So politicians basically are pretty narcissistic, self-serving lot. And when it looks like their neck is about to go into the noose, they'll do something. Now, maybe do something too late.
Okay, Bill, let me ask you, what could be done about the never-ending plume of radioactivity that's going to be coming and hitting and spreading all up and down the coast, including the wave action, which will create marine mist and the marine layer carrying more radioactivity, and some of it will move inland. So what can be done about it?
Well, okay, the most powerful thing that mankind has is his imagination. And let's say you're not bound by living in the 21st century, but you can just use your imagination like sci-fi. Think of a radioisotope as a diamond, and each of those radioisotopes, that is, let's say, radioiodine-131 or cesium-137, 134, these are like little diamonds or gemstones, and there's a specific facet or line of cleavage in which, if you hit them with specific subatomic harmonics, you can cleave them like a diamond. I know that there's a potential for that technology because Nikola Tesla talked about it in the 1920s to Madame Curie. As I mentioned in previous shows, I think that we need to start looking at that as a way of degrading nuclear material on site that's around all these nuclear reactors. It's dangerous to move it. I mean, they didn't even design over 30-some years a proper rail car to move this safely anywhere around the country.
Good point.
The problem is that all the roads, none of the roads in America are safe. I'll give you an example. I was one of the doctors at Rocky Mountain Ahmed in the 90s, and we had an incident where a large truck containing highly radioactive nuclear waste from Rocky Flats, liquid waste containing a super high concentration. One of the trucks got turned back by the state trooper, asked for the bill of lading, and asked the driver to pull out his radiation detector, and found out that the amount of radiation in liquid waste in the truck was somewhere around 50 million times more radioactive than he was allowed on the freeway. So he turned it back and sent it back to Rocky Flats. But another truck got through, and it got up onto black ice up on the I-70, and it slid off an embankment. Now I
remember that.
Yeah, we had to bring in cables to pull that truck down from the tree line because it was heading toward the Colorado River. And if it actually continued, sliding down the side in the wintertime, down into the Colorado River, it would have poisoned the entire, water of the Colorado River. So basically, this stuff is very dangerous to move. Secondly, there's no way of filtering the Pacific Ocean. And filtering is where you're going to put it once you filter it. I mean, they can't filter the material on the site. No. So what we need to do is we need to look at technology that's out of the box. Firstly, on site, as I mentioned before, the 2 major dangers are water and neutrons. Well, why are they talking about moving anything? They're crazy. They don't even tell us that they put ground-penetrating radar to know where the radioisotopes are. They have no idea where the steam tubes are. They've not used any advanced Tier 1 level science which they can space to even image this. Because I know from my contacts, they can image up to 440 meters below ground from space and actually tell you the different material content and the shape of it from space. Okay?
Nowhere to hide, folks.
Right. So people don't understand this. Tier 1 science is the real big awful thing about society is they think they're living in the 21st century, and it's the average general public is. But Tier 1 science is a millennium or more ahead of that. The actual level of science that could solve many of the problems, including energy from the vacuum, from the torsion field around the Earth, to nuclear fusion reactors, to clearing up pollution, to virtually everything you can imagine, curing genetic illness without creating monstrosities, having, if they want to genetically improve food, having stable genetics rather than unstable. The way they're making genetically modified food is unstable. It also allows these unstable gene plasmids to jump out of the animal into, for example, bacteria. So one of the reasons, besides the nicotinoid pesticides killing bees and electropollution, and ultraviolet light, by the way, we've got proof now that ultraviolet light is the most significant single factor killing the bees around the world. But the other factor is these unstable plasmids, and they have a plasmid for Bt or Bacillus thuringiensis toxin, and this generates a neurotoxin that gets in the bee's gut, and that bee's gut bacteria now are toxin factors. Well, we're going to start seeing the same kinds of things in humans, where we see unstable plasmids get inside the people. They may not even be in their genetics. They could be in the extracellular space between cells. If you actually biopsy and look for micronuclei, you can see these plasmids are replicating outside the cell. People say, oh, no, that can't happen. I said, DNA will replicate wherever the heck you put it. If you have an envelope around it, a cell membrane, and you supply it with micronutrients, it's going to replicate. So,
just a quick note. You were correct. That was, in fact, a tandem of state senators in Colorado. It wasn't an assemblyman. It was two state senators, including state Senate president, who were ousted because of their anti-gun vote. So two state senators. And
I think it was another, I don't know, a lower level politician.
There was, but definitely two state senators gone.
Now, of course, that affected three bills that were going to come forward in California. Did you hear the latest that Obama did? He said, well, you guys can have all the guns you want, but we're going to make lead bullets illegal because of an executive order with the Environmental Protection Agency. So you see, Obama doesn't believe in the Constitution. Obama doesn't even believe in rule by persuasion. He believes in basically dictatorial rule by, basically manipulating the population. And it's remarkable. I mean, this man is mentally ill. It's remarkable that he does these things which violate the Constitution. He's supposedly a constitutional expert, but, we don't find any proof that the man was ever even born. We do find pretty good evidence he was probably spawned.
Well,
I mean, yeah. I find it bizarre. And the thing is that each time he does these things, he inflames the population more. And I'm sure that the guys that heard this news today are out there with their bullet-making machines tonight, saying we got to buy as much lead as we can from junkyard and whatever, and make more bullets. I'm thinking, does Obama really think that he's going to take guns away from Americans? How delusional is he?
Yeah, he's as delusional as the scriptwriters that he reads from.
Oh, yeah. Well, if he doesn't have his little Suki, his teleprompter, he doesn't know what to do, because he demonstrates, when you listen to his NLP talking, and when he doesn't have a teleprompter, he demonstrates signs of somebody that has some degree of drug-induced organic brain damage. He has a number of very subtle behaviors. You can even see it in someone who's, quote, previously relatively intelligent, but he doesn't demonstrate that. He has social intelligence, like what we call animal intelligence.
Well, it's predatory.
Predatory, but he doesn't have what we call native intelligence, where he can look at an issue from multiple sides or try to be creative.
Correct.
He basically is basically a sock puppet for George Soros and the global bankers.
Yeah.
And right now I think he's getting agitated because he's being treated like a houseboy, literally, in the White House, and he's been told to do this one week, and then the people are pulling in the other direction the other week. I think the same thing with the XL pipeline in Syria. I think there's forces that are pulling him to not fight, and there's forces pushing him to fight. And he's in the middle, being treated like a houseboy, and he's getting pretty agitated. You can see from his anger in his face and his voice. Here's a man who thought he was the president. He realized he's just the actor.
Wake up, Barry. You're not the president.
You're not the president. You're just the chief punching bag for the globalists, the guys that are sitting behind the boardroom tables chomping on their pencils. They're the ones that are actually calling the shots. And if you don't do what they say, your wife had her first inaugural dress that looked like a black widow. Didn't it? Wow. Yeah, it looked like a black widow. Yeah, actually, if you go back to the videos, you can see her dress was red with the black widow symbols all over it. It was just amazing. I thought, whoa, that's a black widow.
Yeah,
of course, being an emergency doctor, I know black widows. We have them around here, by the way, in Southern California. They're scary little bugs.
They're not pretty. Not pretty at all.
Scary, yeah.
Okay, well, we will see what happens. The plume, the radioactive plume, is working its way across. It's actually the vanguard of it's already here. The more densely populated parts are coming.
Yeah, but I think people can protect themselves. If they take the right nutraceuticals, if they have a radiation detector and knows a major surge of radiation, seal off your house, use your HEPA filter, stay indoors, hunker down till it passes, which may only be in a matter of hours or days. But you got to be aware. You got to know how to do hazmat, which is really simple. You know, decon, where you leave your rain clothes going outside.
We're going to have to rely on the citizen scientists with Inspector Plus to go on the internet and tell us when these waves come through.
Right, you're not going to get it from the government. The government are absent without leave, and if anything, they're going to be logging on to the citizen blogs to find out what's really going on. Because,
exactly right.
Yeah, there is so much trying to chase their own nose. It's ridiculous.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Talk to you next week.
Yeah, lots of things happening.
All right.
Take care.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.